The alignment piece is very, very important. Like I said, the first 2 months I spoke with pretty much everyone I could speak with to get buy-in. And I had people who had said, Shreya, I don't know what you're unleashing.
Welcome to the Chief AI Officer or CAIO podcast, where AI mentor Sanjay Puri talks with the leaders shaping tomorrow's technology. We explore their stories, challenges, and big ideas driving change. So if you're curious about how AI is transforming work, business, and everyday life, this is your front row seat to the future. Today on the CAIO Connect podcast, we're joined by Shreya Amin, New York State's former and first Chief AI Officer, someone who shaped the country's earliest statewide AI strategies. Shreya is known for building responsible AI frameworks, leading large-scale data transformations, and guiding public and private organizations through the future of intelligent systems.
Shreya, welcome to the CIO podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here and have this conversation with you.
Awesome. Shreya, we have a global audience. This is an audience made up of your peers, firstly. These are also people who are aspiring to be in this role, and AI entrepreneurs and AI enthusiasts. So just for them, just briefly, if you can just tell them a little bit about your background. Sure. How did you get to this point?
It's been an interesting journey. I thought I would do theoretical math and physics. And at some point I said, no, I'd like to see what's in the real world. I left that. And there were hardly any data science jobs then. So I did what most of us who came from that background did, joined a hedge fund as a quant. At a hedge fund as a quant, and then in finance, and then in just software, and then education tech, government, so civic tech, city level, state level, health tech, which is very close to my heart. So anytime I wanted to build something interesting or do something interesting, I'd do it through my company. Yeah, so I think that experience has been across sectors in building and deploying data and AI systems. So lots of learnings from that, and that's why I'm here.
During that time frame, what do you think you were able to achieve in a short time frame, and what you think you kind of left behind, wish you could have accomplished?
So before I joined, the New York State had what they call the AI policy, which is the acceptable AI use case policy, which was a high-level, state-level policy that said we will use AI in these ways. First thing I learned as soon as I joined was a lot of agency leaders, and I spent the first month or two just talking to agencies about their pain points, what products they were using, what their roadmaps were. And the first thing was, we don't even know how to operationalize the policy, which tends to be a case in enterprises as well, which is we have an AI policy. We say these are the problems we want to avoid, but then how do you actually operationalize it? So that became evident. The second is the governor had announced that we want to upskill the New York State labor force, so the employee force, which was amazing because I think that will become a bigger and bigger priority. So how do you actually do that? How do you actually implement and roll out a training program for the entire workforce, all of whom are at different exposure, comfort levels with AI? And there's a flip side in the government that you care about, which is the fear of job losses. They said. So I think navigating that. The third was kind of bringing together under one umbrella. So I was fortunate enough to sit in ITS where the leaders and I were aligned that we kind of need a product vision, which doesn't always exist in the government. And we had some amazing product and experienced people. First thing we did is kind of, how do you bring this together? And with the GenAI wave, the easiest thing is kind of focus on document processing. There's so many easier things. So I think draw out a vision that says that patterns that look like this, high volume, which the state has, backlogs, which the state has. So I think being able to explain to the agency leaders that there are patterns where AI will fit. Here's how you think about the use cases. You should go do that. So I think we did all three of those. And so the policy we were iterating over, the learning and rolling that out, we were iterating over. And so I think and then going from that to product use cases and the governance. I think that's where we made the biggest leadway because that's something we could control and move the fastest. To the extent that when I was there, we rolled out basically about 3 to 4 AI they're more than pilots because they're things that can be used. They're small, ready projects that were available. And so we did that in sprints, which usually is not how states roll it out. And I think that's the biggest. It's a template of how are we going to test new products, AI products. Who are we going to involve? How are we going to train as we roll it out? What that looks like. And obviously there's a compliance piece to it. So, but we were able to do that roll out the first product within 4 weeks, which was really incredible. Yes, we hadn't built it, but we were able to do that. So that set a template and gave a lot of people a lot of confidence. So I think putting the foundations of product vision, AI vision, impact vision, and then how to do it responsibly, those foundations are there. Where I did leave, and I wish I could have seen and pushed it through, is we really felt that bringing in code assist tools is such a low-hanging ROI project.
Should one pick the use cases?
So in the public sector, where I think buy-in becomes probably a bigger barrier than it might be in enterprises where the charter is top-down, right? So if you look at that, that's why I said you want small wins, but those small wins will compound. So I think the biggest way to think about this is, one, where do you have high volume? So if there's something that your org or your function is doing 5,000 times a month, each time it takes 15 minutes, really go simple and say, our target is to make it 2 to 3 minutes. Don't complicate it. Because if you can formulate that, those are good places because you have the high volume. Generally with high volume in public sector, you're going to see bottlenecks. So examples are benefits claim processing, business permit processing, caseworker summaries, all of these. So anything that has a pattern of coordination, triaging, routing in high volume becomes a really good place because you have a lot of really good data. So from that perspective, it's that. And you can make a statement about capacity, right? You can say something like, now we can process 40% more applications in the same time period. So you want to go after things that are going to get you those wins. But on the same page, you want to put down, do you have a number in mind you can move? Like I said, we do this. It takes us 15 minutes to do this. We want to cut it to 2 to 3. So if you don't, the biggest thing I say is let's try to get an estimate. Is it 15 minutes? Is it 5 minutes? Is it 30 minutes? So what's the number you want to move and what is it today? And in that simple question, you see basically a lot of the hidden complexity is there because what's the number today and can we move it? Asks the question, is the data there today? Otherwise, I think in public sector, what happens is because you have so many legacy systems, this system was bought 40 years ago, this was 10 years ago, right? So what you end up saying is, I end up seeing leaders who will say, we can just put it together, don't worry. No. That becomes a 6-month to a 12-month data pipeline engineering project. So avoid that. So what's the number you want to move? What is it today? Can we move it in a quarter, right? Do we have the data to measure that today? And if you get those right and look at that in high volume places, I think that's a good way to not get very ambitious, but do that. The math is very clear, right? Like high volume, easy to measure, triage, like sort the pile. That's how I look at it. Whenever you get something, it's like the pile just keeps adding up of things your humans need to do. Sort that in priority, and then you land up with some pretty good use cases. Yeah.
What was the reporting structure like from a governance standpoint? Because this is for some of your peers to know how, if they take up these kinds of roles, what should happen.
Yeah. So I'll tell you about New York State, and then I'll tell you a couple of other structures that exist in state-level public sector. So New York State, I was sitting under, so New York State has, like you said, 50 plus agencies. ITS, which is Information Technology Services, is one agency, and it's about 4,000 people. The way New York State is structured, ITS provides technology services to all of the other agencies.
So like a shared service.
Exactly. It's a shared services model. And then obviously you'll have dedicated.
Correct.
Right? That kind of a scenario. And so this role sat in that department.
In
I think
ITS.
In ITS, yes. There was a conversation about whether it sits outside or not, but I think having it under ITS makes sense because it should sit very closely with technology. At the same time, the other pieces I mentioned, the policies, the other proposals and potential policies would come my way for review. And those all sit outside of ITS. So there is the executive chamber that the governor's office has. So I worked directly with them on the policy pieces and the training pieces. And the technology pieces would be in ITS. Now I think I've met other kind of data and AI officers in other states where they might sit in an office of innovation, or they might sit in some other structure. But ITS, because it had a shared services model, this made sense.
So on the commercial side, when I talk to chief AI officers, generally of Fortune 500 companies, and I would like to dig in later with you on, they talk about this role as being more of a transformation role. Is ITS the right place to be for a transformation role? But is that the way it should be?
The roadmap for this office, so the AI office in New York State is a brand new office. The roadmap would be like anything else, where you have a shared services models, you build out these patterns, or you architect these patterns that make sense, and then you have individuals or leaders who are embedded in agencies that are still reporting structure would be to ITS or AI office, and then they would operationalize that with their peers in that agencies. So I think there might be a way to push this along for a few years at least. It's a good question what happens once AI is basically the foundation on which we build things. I think structures everywhere change, right? This whole coordination piece goes away because we'll have agents coordinating, and you're not going to need me to say, do this. The systems will talk to each other, in which case it becomes more about the judgment call and accountability. And I believe that the judgment and accountability will probably always sit closer to agencies. So you end up seeing this thing where you maybe are more buying decisions and kind of setting the standards decisions, but the judgment of that rollout will shift to, right now the judgment sits with the AI office.
Change management is a huge, huge issue. How did you deal with the whole reskilling issue for them? Because that's something your peers are also dealing with right now.
So in these sectors, those of us who sit close to the technology pieces and sectors, we see it move at lightning speeds. So we see that the urgency to do this, because at some point citizens are going to, like, I can call Uber and see where my Uber driver is, order pizza and see where my pizza is, but I can't see where my benefits might be, or I can't see where I am in the queue for an MRI that's very important to me. So I think I see very soon citizens are going to ask, well, why can't I do this? I want to be able to do this, which is a fair question, which means healthcare and public sector has to move fast, which means when people like me join, we want to say we should be reskilling really fast. The biggest learning is you can't do it really fast. I think you had a very wise insight, which was people have been there for decades. So it has to be rolled out in phases. I mean, that's just the reality of it, because you have to think about, there is a foundational level. I'm just going to say GenAI. It's not all AI training that we're giving people. It's more GenAI first. So there's a foundational, what is GenAI? What are the concerns? What does safety look like? And so there's a foundational thing, training that you want everyone to have. And most of the people should have a tool to play with, and it can't be ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini out of the box. So you have an enterprise version of that in your cloud. And so those go hand in hand. So that's a learning we had, that we want to be able to give. We can't do one without the other. Now, you also can't roll it out to everyone, because the concerns there are, one, not everyone needs it. You really then need role-based training, which you need to really think about, how do you roll it out? You can't roll things out unless multiple really large stakeholders, like the HR departments, the unions, and the leaders of agencies are all on the same page. So I think it has to be done in a phased way. I was hoping we would be able to move a little bit faster than that. It's just not possible. And I think no other state has done it really quickly either. So you go like a couple of thousand, even that's a lot. So you go 500, maybe 1,000, a few thousand, and then there's no state yet that's done this for the entire state. I think it's just a harder problem than I thought it would be. So yeah, I think the alignment piece is very, very important. Like I said, the first 2 months I spoke with pretty much everyone I could speak with to get buy-in. And I had people who had said, Shreya, I don't know what you're unleashing. That was the word. But I hope, you're not going to be able to put it back in. So, So that was one thing.
The genie's out of the bottle.
The genie's out of the bottle, right? And the concern there becomes, are you demoralizing the young people who came here based on a writing test? And now you're saying you have a system that's going to write and draft for you. So that upskilling piece becomes really important. But unless you have very concrete ways you're going to upskill, if not, you're just giving awareness.
The question obviously is reskilling talent, but you still also need the top-notch AI talent. So that, how difficult is that, and how do you tackle that, Shreya?
Now is the time you can add in the government or in the health sector or any sector that's you're passionate about. So it is hard. It takes a long time to actually hire once you find the right candidates. With New York State, that office will now be based in New York City, which will be helpful. So if you're fortunate enough to be in a place like New York State, you can go to a hub where that civic tech duty, like a lot of people feel that. We were looking at hiring people from grad school. So building a very small R&D team, because you want to be able to do a lot of experiments in a safe way as opposed to buy every product. And we were seeing good results there. And I think the other things that you asked me, one of the things I wish I'd done, I really thought that it would be nice to have kind of partnerships with some AI people. So I think there are folks who are working in AI, are well-known names. They talk about impact and all of that. So having that, they're completely outside as an advisory team. So that could be from someone, founders of Kira's, like Sebastian Rashka, or I didn't ask any of these people. So my goal was to go to a few people and bring them in as advisors, honestly, because that helps you attract people who are following them, and you might be able to build a bridge. So that's one way. I know cities and states do hackathons. The other thing is actually having some innovation pathway, right? So where you're working, if you're in New York City, then you're working with startups or interns and getting them interested in projects. So I think there's probably a path where you hire them full-time, you hire them as consultants, you hire them as advisors, and then you hire them based on specific needs in a fractional way.
What was the thought behind it? Was it to create your own LLM, or what was the purpose of that?
I think the purpose is, it's not to build your own LLM. I don't think a public sector yet can be in the business of building an LLM and competing, and I think the investment is too high. But it's I think to be able to do experiments, they're small models, right? You can work with universities, give them that compute power, collaborate with them. So it's, I think, university public sector collaborations to increase innovation in general in New York State, and then as a byproduct of that, benefit the public sector. So I think there was a lot of support on data centers and compute and those kinds of partnerships, which feels like the right way to do it, yeah.
So one of the things a lot of chief AI officers, especially in the commercial world, are pressured on is to show ROI. In a public sector environment, again, to whomever you're reporting to, let's say to the board or your CFO, et cetera, what kind of matrix does one need to show to make sure that that's a successful implementation for some of your peers?
Budgets are constrained in the public sector. There are transactions between agencies and between ITS and other agencies. And so I think this is across all states. So it is done through transactions. And the biggest way to kind of figure out if the way you're thinking about solving a problem using AI or the product you build has any value is still the same. Is that agency willing to pay a certain amount of money for this product? And so the way to do that is, right, like you can't, if we think about fairness from an opportunity perspective, there's some agencies that are not revenue generating agencies, and they're very small agencies. Mm-hmm. So the ask of them is a little bit different than you have revenue generation agencies, which are usually okay with paying for a product. And obviously there's no concept of profit, right? It's basically what the base product is, what your team's time is, whatever. So there's a calculation you can do. It's the same like you would do in an industry, like if you were doing within an enterprise. So the pressure is still there and that comes from being able to stay constrained yourself to a budget. And same constraints hold, right? Like how the cost of building your AI product, the cost of running your AI product, the cost of deploying it. Did you capture the workflows correctly? Is it solving the problem they want? Are they willing to pay for this problem? There's a lot of want to experiment and explore, just like in the industry, but the want to buy is very different. So all of those constraints still hold. I think you're not reporting to shareholders, and you're not looking to make a profit. The unit economics need to work anyway. For it to be feasible and sustainable.
Should we have total autonomy for agents, like goal-driven agents, or you still think that there should be, a human in the loop from that standpoint?
I think depends on the risk or the cost of that, right? So I think the way I think about this is right now, today, the way agents are, they're very good as coordinators, right? So they will, at a high level, they coordinate really well. So you can do that. And coordination generally is a limited exercise. There's no decision-making authority except I'm going to coordinate things, get data from this system, and do this to this human. So I get an application. It has a number of things missing. All these things sit in these 4 systems. Agent can consolidate. It's almost like what a project manager does to a large extent from the reporting perspective. And so I think we build without actually having a human in the loop, because the error is cheap. It's reversible. You'll catch it. So I have a thing where I say, okay, we care in the industry about how accurate something is. How accurate something is, great. We should also care about the cost of getting something wrong, and then the time to find out something is wrong and fix it. Routing agents, great. Next is going to be reviewable. So you actually review, think it looks like this, flag it, have a human look at it. And then obviously anything irreversible and that's binding your agency into a financial risk or a legal risk, you're just not even going to give it to agents right now. I think we're away from that. So should there be human in the loop? For anything that's being reviewed, and even if a decision is being suggested, yes. But it doesn't have to look at it. It doesn't have to look like the human is still doing the same work, right? It's not. It's just a review. Yes, no, input and moving on. So I look at it as like routable things, reviewable things, and then regulated things. Don't do regulated things right now, right? The other 2, you kind of use your judgment on. And routable things are usually very easy to do, and you can still do them very confidently now. Yeah, and the cost is cheap and reversible. So.
Yeah. So when you say regulated things don't do, so is AI agents in healthcare kind of out?
Is the damage reversible, right? I think, or is this a reversible decision? Forget even damage. And so there are places, like I think we are deploying agents in prior auth, right? Which is a great example of, it's a little bit more than just routing. So what that means is like a clinician is taking their notes, and they're going to spend so much time putting that in a format that now you need to submit for authorization from the payer. That's a great place for an agentic system framework to come in, because you're buying the clinician's time back to actually do the job that they're here to do, which is serve the patients. And so we're seeing a lot of agentic AI companies there, and I think those are good use cases. I actually think even some high stakes might be okay if you have operators sitting next to researchers. Like one of the folks I think I was telling you earlier, they have developed a sepsis AI system. Now, it's not an agentic framework, it's a deep learning framework, but they will build agents to orchestrate that. And that's a very high stakes situation, but they've done randomized controlled trials to show it works. They sat down and cracked the workflow over months. They didn't do this in isolation. They brought the clinicians, the nurses, tested it. They shadowed it for like 6 months. So that system didn't do anything. It just compared what the human did. And so they have a really good playbook that they did. It took them 2 years to get this out. So I think they are now, and they got mortality down by 17%. So it forces you to ask, maybe it shouldn't be so black and white, where you have leaders who've done so much hard work. We want to be able to show that it can be done. But if you don't have them, then yeah, I think stay away from regulated.
So are you suggesting that people should stay away from general purpose LLMs and go to more industry specific LLMs? Or what can be done to make sure these pilots succeed?
So what I find, and this was at the public sector and the healthcare sector, now when I'm advising and consulting, I find that they'll say, yeah, here's our process document. We get this input, we route it here. This is our document on, write a rubric based on which an X, Y, and Z. So what I tend to do is say, give me your ugliest use cases from the last 3 months, the ugliest, like the messiest. And then you try to kind of walk that through, and you find that no, you have 24 workarounds and exceptions and edge cases that say, oh, I don't know the answer to that. Maria's always done that. So I just go to Maria and ask that, and it's not documented anywhere. So I think a lot of times, even things that can succeed fail is because we just don't have that clarity on the workflow. And so those are examples where the general purpose LLMs can work because they're pretty good enough to do this. But I think our workflows are just wrong. We built for the wrong workflow, and obviously it's not going to work. And I see that again and again and again. So a chunk of that is solvable through that. Now then you get into a place where the domain matters. And I think then if you're that enterprise data or knowledge, either it's through RAG usually or fine-tuning or some combination or however you're doing it, you do need that. You do need that domain expertise and the knowledge because there's so much tacit knowledge. Again, it's same the thing as the earlier one. The workflow, you miss the gaps of how it actually works versus what's on paper. Here also, I think there's so much tacit situational awareness and knowledge that isn't captured anywhere. So you need them involved, I think. Yeah.
So when you were at New York State, from a, like when I talk to Fortune 500's chief AI officers, a lot of them have ethics committees or governance committees for AI. Did New York State have something of that nature, or how was that kind of being done?
New York State had, there was a enterprise kind of risk office. Then there was general counsel, both of whom served different purposes in reviewing this. There was a governance path that had been set up before I got there, and it was largely driven by the ethics committee, or it wasn't called the ethics committee, it was more like the risk committee, in reviewing any project or use case that came. Much needed, but as you can imagine, the flip side of that is agencies saying it's slowing us down, and you've probably heard this. So there's that thing, but that structure was there. I think the job was to review that. And one of the things we were looking at it is the way we're doing it as human first is definitely becoming a blocker. So you kind of have to go towards guardrails embedded in your deployment itself. So rather than writing a document, we should have documents and policies, but how do you operationalize that? So we want logging, we want to store this data, we want PII, so make that part of the deployment ask versus a separate one. So I think there were things that we were considering with that committee. So usually anything will get reviewed by that risk committee from policy. Are we violating any existing New York State policies? From security for security purposes, from CTO's office for infra and what does that look like? And from the AI office for use case, and then looking at the AI ethics uses of it and how are we going to get impact and the ROI and all of that.
Just to give somebody an idea that what skills should a chief AI officer really hone in on?
Yeah. I've asked, several people have reached out to me about that specific question, so I think it's a great one. And because these are new roles, and at a state level, this was a new office. So I was the first one. There's no precedence here. There's nothing, we're kind of building a roadmap, building the policies. I would say initially, so much of the first set of time, I would say in the first month or so, a lot of your time is just conversations with leadership. It's so much about relationship building. And it's sort of a prerequisite for change management that you're saying, because if you don't have that trust, if you don't have that, it just doesn't work in a place like a public sector with the complexity that it has. So I would say a huge part of my job was speaking to leadership about and understanding kind of their business, their goals, what their org looks like, what kinds of projects they've taken on so far, and their concerns and opportunities and however they view this. And then it gets into two things. I think initially, because it was a small office, we hadn't hired people yet. So I was still thinking about the technical piece a lot more than I would eventually, someone will do a year from now, right? Because we haven't set up the foundations of what this looks like. We don't know what that environment, AI environment, the AI office's environment, to your point, building guardrails, what does that look like? So we're having a lot of technical conversations as well. But I think most of the time is around change management and iterating really fast on that, because it just looks very different agency to agency to agency. So you come in and say it's going to work this way. It doesn't. So I think the biggest thing is to be very agile. Some agencies were very, very enthusiastic. Sure, any AI you want to roll out, we're the first ones. We really want it. Then 80% in the middle are like, no, come to me when we're in the middle of the pack. I've been in meetings where it's like, I don't know, maybe we'll just go back to paper. We don't need AI. So I think your change management piece starts in different places with different agencies. And then that is a huge part of your time. So what does that structure look like, where it's still an accelerator versus a blocker? You have to manage the governance pieces and still make sure you're moving.
So change management, were you prepared for that?
There have been places where we've rolled something out, and I've personally gotten on a call with a nurse because they said, I'm not going to use this. So it wasn't at the level where it's needed. But I think you also have a lot of support, right? There are a lot of, what's nice in a place like the public sector is that there are a lot of other people who've been there for so long. So what you do is you usually call on them to help you navigate, because someone in IT has used to be working on technology in, let's say, DMV. So they have really strong relations that go back 10 years, 15 years, 20 years at DMV, and they will help you navigate that. And similarly across the agents. So I think you don't look at it as doing it in isolation. I never looked at it doing anything in isolation. You can't. You just can't. And so I don't think you can fully prepare for that. But what I did learn, and I think going back to your question, is you have to know what your strengths are, and you have to lean into that. So if you think your strength is highly policy-based and you do that really well, then what you do is you go in and take that monster on yourself and ask for support elsewhere. And people will step up, because everyone wants to see something exciting like this succeed. And if you've been there for 2 decades, you want to see it improve the state operations. And my strengths were more like strategy and technical. I enjoy that space. And so I can ask help for something else. So I think just know your strengths and then be clear about that, lean into that, and just ask for help elsewhere. It works.
For a chief AI officer to succeed, what are the 2-3 very important things that would you suggest to the ones that are listening in? Because as I said, there's at least 2-3 of them being hired every day.
I think your ability to not shy away from details. And I think I keep going back to that. And what I mean by that is, so I think first you need to understand why, especially in the private sector, right? You have to be able to have a conversation. You need to empower that C-suite, the CEO pretty much, or the board, to have trust in you, because you need that budget. You're going to need the control, right? And so the ability to tie in multiple pieces, right? So the ability to say, our business does X. Okay, I'm going to tie in my AI pieces. Almost every AI workflow or AI project I take on, I don't really like using the word project, because it means that it need not have a successor. So I think to be able to tie it into unit economics for the company. I always say, if you are new somewhere, show value within the first 30 days, and then show even more value within the first quarter. And it feels like the CIO role might be where we can't do it, but I think you can, right? I think, and the way to think about this is, the board thinks of it this way. AI should be an operating leverage. That's the language the board wants. And what I mean by that is, okay, the cost to do X will come down with this. The capacity or throughput is going to increase with this. 40% increase in this. Cost for X goes down this much. And so that is, start with those formulations. If you can't do that, you can't sell it to the CFO or the CEO or the board. And so I think those pieces, so tie the business outcomes to your strategy. And when I say details, I mean that. Like, force yourself or work with others to find some number you can move. If you can do that, the path becomes much clearer.
What is your perspective as a chief AI officer when you look at it, whether it's from the public sector, whether you looked at it from Wellist, etc.?
I think data quality has been a problem that goes back whatever number of years. So it is true that a lot of data exists. It is also true that most of it is not being used. So you have this really interesting problem that a lot of data exists. It sits in so many different places. We've not been able to integrate or orchestrate, which is why I think this wave is very important, because you can now orchestrate a little bit more easily. And so I hear people say we're going to take on data readiness and data quality as a thing at the enterprise level. The reality is you could be doing that as long as the enterprise exists. So I think getting clarity on where the highest value, like I said, for that organization might be. So if it's about scheduling at a hospital for surgeries where you're losing money, you take that on, and then the data quality problem there, and then the highest impact obviously will come in the hardest pieces, right? Like I think I had spoken to an emergency room physician recently, and he was a medical officer. He is a medical officer now, but he was the emergency room. And he said, sure, do you know how many systems I looked at in the emergency room? Maybe a dozen. So he is looking at 12 monitors, trying to consolidate it and trying to say, okay, can you show me the weak trend here and that? So the data exists, right? This is an orchestrate and collection problem. I spoke with EMS agency leaders, and they said, we have so many decisions we make which are based on thresholds and looking at 15 systems. And so the ability to do something there. So I think there is, it's also scarcity of data is also there for what is the actual workflow. But I think if you just start with the data that exists and the decisions that some key stakeholders are making and that's blocking them. I don't yet know if the lowest hanging problems for the public sector and health sector, you kind of need to worry about synthetic data. You're not short of that data. I think that'll happen down the road, right? Like maybe when you're doing more R&D, maybe when you're really short of, let's say, video data and you're trying to do something multimodal. But I think like your process data is still rich enough. And you probably couldn't get really strong synthetic data on that because you still don't know what that process is and why it's scattered anyway. So I would not bring in that as one of my next 2 or 3 quarter roadmap if I'm starting something here. Down the road, 100%, right? We know that we're running out of data. But I think by the time we get that there with these slower or more or systems built on legacy systems, you have other problems. So we can solve those first. And then we'll have a lot more stability and reliability on that synthetic data.
As a chief AI officer, if you were looking to hire somebody in your team, what would the skills that you look for?
So I'm not saying that we all need to be able to build models and agents, but we need to be able to know that agents can do this, GenAI, LLM capabilities do this, so that when you see a use case, you can honestly say, I don't think this is going to work the way it is. So the ability to kind of map capabilities to something real world. So then I think a product mindset, I think today is very helpful. By that, I mean, think who are the users? What are the pain points? How do we solve them? What does a workflow look like? Curiosity at the end of it all. I don't know what else to say except like so much of what will drive you now in the next decade if you're younger is curiosity. Like I don't think there's going wrong if you follow that because like we run into so many things. Are you evaluating this correctly? Wait, did we map the workflow correctly? Did that manager over there, do they know how to train that people? So it doesn't have to be technical. I think that is like, and this, it's maybe you don't code and that's fine. We have tools that will do it. But I think that curiosity and thinking grounds up, foundational thinking, have the patience to build it grounds up, be insanely curious. And I think, yeah.
I think those are great points for folks who are looking to build their career. Insane curiosity, that's the key word. Yeah. Insane curiosity. Finally, Shreya, for our audience, if there's one actionable piece of advice to current CIOs, chief AI officers, what would that be from you?
We need more operational playbooks. I genuinely believe that.
And what do you mean by, just explain that for our audience.
What I mean by operational playbooks is it could be something small for a workflow. It could be something for of how are you deploying AI and what are the levers there, right? So think about the levers. We spoke about change management, team structure. Usually when you roll this out, you think I only need skill sets that look like A, B, and C, and then you find out that maybe I need more. What was that gap? How long does it take? You're navigating compliance all the time, maybe even regulation, your ways of doing that successfully or unsuccessfully. So that's what I mean by operational play. Like going from strategy to actually now seeing it in production, almost at scale, if not at scale. There have been a lot of decisions that got made, and everyone's making them slightly differently. And what we don't have are more operational playbooks that we can compare against, that we can give to each other. It's a lonely thing. Like when I joined the state, there was no one. I couldn't call up a previous AI officer at the state and say, hey, what about this? So you're constantly navigating this. So I think our ability to have concrete things to share so that the next person who comes along doesn't have to do this all by themselves. And we could do it faster, better, right? So I think I don't know what this looks like, but I think all of us kind of need to come together to figure out what this is going to look like so we can accelerate the next wave and the next wave and do it responsibly and safely and impactfully.
This has been great. We need to have you back so that we can continue this conversation. But thanks so much for being on the CIO podcast.
Thank you so much for making this so interesting. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Chief AI Officer podcast with Sanjay Puri. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to leave a comment. We'd love to hear what you thought. And share it with someone curious about the future of AI. Join us every Friday right here on the CAIO podcast as we share more stories and insights from the leaders shaping what's ahead.